Okay, this lesson we're going to review the Middle Ages, and in this one, we're just really going to talk about the power of the church in the Middle Ages and the influence that they had over people's everyday lives. The church was a very big part of everyone's lives at the time. They had a whole lot of power, as you saw in the other lessons, that they were basically the guiding factor in the Crusades and telling people that if they fought in the Crusades and if they died in the Crusades, that they were going to be absolved of all their sins and just be welcomed into heaven with open arms. They had a lot of influence, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Some of it is a little bit repeated from the last lessons, but keep taking notes and making sure that you understand that this lesson is just talking about the side of power coming from the church. All right, so the power of the church. Christianity in the Middle Ages as a society withered after the fall of Rome. So Christianity itself was a constant, but everything else was kind of just falling apart. Popes and church leaders were able to use this, the power vacuum in Europe in a way to expand their power and kind of take over. Christianity spread by missionaries, which were people that would go off and preach the word of God and start these. They would travel to other places to do works, good Christian works on behalf of the church. Clovis and attacks by Muslims. Okay, so the power of the church. So the church structure, the church had different ranks of clergy or religious officials, just like the social classes of the Middle Ages. The church has the same exact structure. The Pope is the head of the church, and all the clergy, including bishops, priests, all fall under the Pope's authority. So for most people, the local priest served as the main contact with the church, and then they would have to go up the ranks if they had any sort of issues or disputes. Okay, religion as a unifying force. Feudalism created the division, but church techniques bonded them together. Priests and other clergy administered sacraments or religious ceremonies. And then all were subject to canon law or church law. So the education system in the church was very vital. Church offered the only place to receive an education in the Middle Ages. And monasteries were religious communities for men, while women or nuns lived in convents. So the far-reaching authority that the church had at the time, the Christian church was becoming a secular or worldly extension, and extended their influence into politics. There was a lot of going back and forth between the church and whoever was the king at the time or in that region. So an example of secular, Pope Gregory I used church revenues to raise armies, repair roads, and help the poor. In this country, we have a separation of church and state, so things like this would not happen. But in that time, the church had a lot of power. So the church sought to influence spiritual and political matters when it crowned Charlemagne, the Roman emperor, in 1800. They felt that they had the authority to do certain things and influence whoever the emperor would be so that they can influence their power into how the world would be run. So the Investiture Controversy, the church was unhappy with its use of lay investitures. So lay investitures were kings appointing church officials. They didn't want the kings to do that. They wanted to do it themselves from within the church. This way, the king didn't have access to do what they wanted to do. They had to do what the church wanted them to do. So Pope Gregory banned the lay investiture in 1075. The German Emperor Henry IV was furious with Pope Gregory. Henry demanded that the Pope step down, and Gregory excommunicated Henry. Excommunication just means he was taking away a person's right of membership into the church. So King Henry was no longer allowed to set foot in the church. The Concordant of Worms was a compromise between the German king and the Pope. And the result of this was that throughout the Middle Ages, the power of the church grew, and it was able to provide unity, education, and strong empires. It even allowed the Pope to abandon morality and call for the bloody event known as the Crusades, which we talked about in the previous lesson. They were able to twist around the truth and kind of use religion to do what they wanted done. Make sure that you write down any notes that you have. If you need to rewatch the video, feel free to do so. And if you have any questions, go ahead and write them down so that we can address them in class.